the 2023 Yentla Basin Rendezvous. Let's give a little round of applause. Right? Here we are. Well, it's such a pleasure to have all of you here. We are glad that you made it here safely. There were some downed trees, I think, between people and this place, Albright Auditorium. Earlier today, a couple of nights ago, we had some dramatic electrical storms that delayed arrivals. And I think I see some faces around the room that made it here despite those storms. I mentioned to some folks the other day, I was in this room with these shades up during those storms, and alongside 4 or 5 really stellar meteorologists. It's a pretty cool group to watch an electric storm. My name is Nathan Stewart. I'm faculty here at Colorado Mountain College and a member of the steering committee. I'll be one of the voices you'll hear today at the microphone. I have a few opening words of welcome for us before inviting up our welcome speaker and getting us underway with panel 1. We have a great agenda here for you today. It involves several morning panels, an afternoon field excursion, but before that excursion, stay with us. I'll give you a visual for this in a moment, for a poster session here in the auditorium during that lunch hour. So a first thanks, I won't repeat the broad remarks I gave here yesterday morning, but we do want to credit our friend, photographer Jeff Hall, for this remarkable image that you see being used across our materials. This year, Jeff has been in this area since 1983. Many of us in the room know him very well, both as a chef, Ragnar's, Hazy's, multiple kitchens in our community, and also for his imagery. And this is, of course, Elk Mountain, known locally as the Sleeping Giant. It is treasured here. And I mentioned this yesterday. That day looks a lot like the one outside our doors here today. We had a wet start to spring, moisture in the air. Thank you, Jeff, for this image. A few quick pieces to get on your calendar. We had Dr. Walt Dabbert here with us yesterday, chair of seminars at Steamboat. This event is very closely aligned with this year's Yentla Basin Rendezvous. It's highly relevant in this water year, and we're delighted to have Heather Tenera and Luke Runyon. Many of you know both of those names very well. They'll be here with us just a little bit later this month. Take a moment to take a phone photo, or if you want to use that QR code right now, you're allowed to have your phones out. A couple minutes here before we start. We're delighted to have this event here in the valley. Let me give you a moment to take a phone photo or so. Great. We hope to see you there. We'd also like to promote this field course that's coming up here in just a couple of weeks. In a typical year, this course would have filled instantly, and you wouldn't have had a chance. There would have been a wait list. There might have been tents going out around the corner, the registrar's office, or attempting a laptop. I suppose you could just enroll online. And that didn't happen this year, and it's on us. We launched this course right as mud season started, and I think a lot of us were transitioning from winter into spring, and we want you to know about this. Please take a phone photo of this too. Take a moment again with your phones to share this with all those who would like to enroll in this course. We have flyers here. Let's maybe you could run those around. Anyone in the room interested in having a flyer here for this field course? Awesome, a couple hands are up. This is a remarkable opportunity. Many folks in the room know Sarah Rathburn really well, fluvial geomorphologist, hydrologist at CSU. She's going to be co-teaching this course with our very own Luke Kimmis, who's a treasured faculty member here at this campus. Many of you know him from his teaching in environmental science, sustainability studies, outdoor education. This is a remarkable pairing. And this course, of course, supports our continuous monitoring of the Yentla River. You can play a role in our scorecard monitoring for river health. So please do share this widely. Community members are welcome. You can ask Kevin all the way down to high school students, SEPA enrollment. So if you have a son or daughter, a neighbor who would be interested in learning basic field skills, please also share this with them. Recent graduates, current seniors are likely most well prepared. to in addition to our community. You're going to help this class fly. I really do want you to enroll and share this. Thank you. So a couple orientation pieces. You have a few packets on your tables here. The one on the left is our full program. It has things like today's agenda, more detailed speaker bios. Please take a moment to orient in that. On the right side of the screen here, save a few moments at the get-go. You may not know the campus or this facility yet, and this is your guide to know. Where can I find my water bottle? Where are those restrooms? So take a moment to orient here as well. And a few brief words here on today's agenda, a couple highlights from yesterday as well. So today we have, right at that lunch hour I mentioned, a research poster session brown bag. You can see some of the posters around the room here. Those will be set up in a session. Bring your lunch with you. Hit Main Street for a moment, get takeout, come back up here. We would love to have you join that poster session. This afternoon, we have a field excursion out to the O'Neill's family farm at Elk Head Creek Ranch, which is a treasured place here in our landscape, a little bit west, Route Moffett border. As we head towards Craig, we're really delighted to meet with Tim and Wayne O'Neill and learn about the projects they have been doing on the ground on their ranch. So some highlights from yesterday, and I'll be brief here. I know many of you are with us in the room, but I'm going to sort of draw a line to this morning's panels and today's field excursion. So we had some wonderful opening remarks from Congressman Joe Magoo's. We will have that address online here, the recording, really soon. Many of you are already on the mailing list for the Valley Sustainability Council. You're seeing a link here, Friends of the Yampa will also have this link as well. So stay tuned. It was wonderful to have his opening words yesterday. Our panel one boldly looked at the low to no snow future predicted for our region. This too, just like Congressman Magoo's recording, will also be made available to you if you're unable to be here with us yesterday morning. Thank you to that panel. Thanks too to our second panel of the day that was looking at how do we get this work done, right? Adaptation, implementation, and capacity. Thanks to all three of those speakers as well. Yesterday afternoon, many of you were outside with us at Fish Creek Water Treatment Plant. That was an excellent session co-hosted by 4 individuals. I'll show you their images here next. There's a shot of us on the right with a couple of them in view presenting to us. They are these folks. Many of you know the importance of Fish Creek Falls, that watershed at large, to our water here. So we thought about its value as a water source, given its forest health, and also really importantly about the risks that it faces under global change, particularly wildfire. Last night was one of those special nights in this valley. We were so very fortunate to have a keynote from Erica Guys, who will meet her today in our second panel of the morning. In addition to her keynote, we had a State of the Yampa, which we can with confidence report is wild. Thank you everyone who was able to make it to last night's event. The evening ended with a film, and it was, again, just such a special evening with the community. Thanks to all of you here who contributed to that conversation. We had a rare Q&A with an author that was really sort of unbounded. We had a chance to really interact with Erica. So thanks to all of you who were here yesterday evening for that. A quick welcome to our 2023 conference speakers. If you weren't here yesterday, you may not know just how diverse this group is. It is local and regional for a broader Intermountain West and West at large. We're so very thankful to have all of you here today who are contributing. A welcome to our students in the room. If you joined a course, you'll see them hard at work on assignments during our panels. If any of you would like to also engage in some homework, we might be able to work out some credit. I think we have the Dean of STEM in the room. We can think about that. It's possible. Let us know. We're very thankful to have them here. You'll have additional students in our programs presenting at the poster session today as well. A couple more words of thanks here. Our support for lodging and food, and enjoy that food while you're here with us today. This is a really special group from our region. Many of you know these organizations very well, and we're so very thankful that they're a part of the Visit Rendezvous this year. Thanks to our steering committee. It's a remarkable group. I had them stand yesterday. I'd love you to take a moment to look around the room and find some of these faces here. We don't get to do an event like this and of this quality and relevance without a team as devoted as the one that we have here. So thank you, steering committee. Let's give a little round of applause to that. And I also want to say a special thanks to our Colorado Mountain College team. We don't get to put on an event like this without the talented team that we have. And that's both our IT team and our facilities team that make this possible. We love this place, and it is all about the students that we serve. Kayla is among those that will present today at the poster session. Come and meet her, learn more about her work. This is why we show up to work every day. Okay, without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome our welcome speaker here this morning, Dr. Carrie Hauser. Since 2013, Carrie has served as president and CEO of Colorado Mountain College, a uniquely financed dual mission. We have bachelor's degree programs here, 2-year and certificate. We are public, we are Hispanic serving. We enroll over 15,000 students annually at 11 campuses in the Central Rocky Mountains. Carrie is currently chair of Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission. How many more meetings, Carrie? One more meeting. Thank you for your service. Her prior board service includes, among many, Great Outdoors Colorado, American Rivers, Glenwood Springs Chamber Resort Association, Vail Valley Partnership, Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce and its Leadership Foundation. Her previous gubernatorial appointments, among many also, were to the Colorado Women's Centennial Vote Commission and the Colorado Commission on Higher Education. Carrie's background includes teaching assignments at UCLA, University of Denver, and Colorado State University. She earned her master's and PhD degrees from UCLA and completed the Advanced Management Program at the Wharton School of Business. Among her many awards and honors is her recognition as the 9 News Leader of the Year and one of the 50 for the future of Colorado. An avid outdoorswoman, Carrie has climbed to the Mount Everest Base Camp, has summited Mount Kilimanjaro, Mount Rainier, and Colorado's 58 highest peaks. These are our treasured 14ers in Colorado. She held the proud title of Swamper while working many summers for Hatch River Expeditions in Grand Canyon National Park. She and her husband Jeff enjoy skiing, hiking, boating, biking, and exploring the Rocky Mountain West and remote places around the world. Carrie, it's such a pleasure to have you here.
It's a nice welcome for a welcome speaker. Good morning, everyone. It is great to see everybody. I was sorry not to be here first thing yesterday morning, so I'm grateful to the planning team for swapping me and a congressman. It's a nice gesture. Anyway, thanks to Congressman Nick, who's a new parent and a new parent again and could not be here. So I think I have some folks driving some slides for me. And I do want to thank Nathan and Maddie and the planning team and Friends of the Yampa and sort of everybody that has leaned into this. I remember well when Nathan and Matt Jost and a few others came to me and said, we're thinking about doing this thing. And here we are, 5 years later, however many years later. So it's been fun to be part of this and to watch it grow and to watch it be really part of the DNA of Colorado Mountain College and this valley in Steamboat Springs, and to see some of you come back every year and to be part of this conversation. So I'm just really, really glad to have you all here. I'm going to go fairly quickly because I want to keep you on schedule, and I'm welcoming another group virtually at 9:30, so I'm going to try to keep myself on time for that. I have to run into my computer next door and then I'll be back. So when Nathan asked me to do welcome, I thought, well, I've been on the river a couple times recently. You all probably have too. And so I thought I'd draw just a couple of parallels, given the theme of the conference, snows, flows, and drought, because we've seen all of them recently. So I thought I'd do that. Nathan gave a quick, next slide, overview of CMC. And I would just, I was talking to Beatrice here, who lives in the Roaring Fork Valley, and she's like, wow, I've never been to the Steamboat campus before. And we really do, we have 11 campuses sprinkled all over these really beautiful mountain resort communities. And we have a map, if it will go. I can do it too. Okay, very good. I can do that, actually. I could probably do that myself. So this is our map. This is kind of the yellow is the part of the geography of Colorado that we serve. It is a big chunk of the state. And it encompasses 8 counties, and we go literally from the Wyoming border all the way to Salida, Colorado, in Chaffee County. We go all the way from the east, essentially, from Summit County, all the way to the Mesa County line, which is where Grand Junction is, and sort of everything in between. And our job is to serve these very high-cost mountain communities. And we do so because we are essentially funded primarily by local property tax, which makes us somewhat unique. We would not be able to deliver this enterprise the way that we do if it were not for our funding model, and so we're very grateful for that. The other thing I asked my team to do is overlay the river system. And when I first was asked, as Nathan mentioned, to serve on the American Rivers Board, which is kind of my personal passion, I was like, it's not an education board, it's not a higher ed board. How do I tell my board, my bosses, that I would like to serve on the American Rivers Board? Well, I asked a couple of our work studies in my office to count the number of rivers that run through the CMC footprint. And the first thing that came back, they're like, 9. I'm like, no, I can count them on my hand, right? Just in our valley where I live, in Glenwood Springs, or for a frying pan, you just go through the list. And so they went back to the drawing board and they did such a nice job. And so I was able to say to my board, well, did you know that the CMC footprint, our geography, is home to 9 major rivers, 16 other, quote, sort of secondary rivers, and 400 unique creeks and streams. And given all the programs that we offer and the connections that we can make for our students, it was a pretty obvious answer. So it was really a great opportunity to be able to serve on that board. I just rolled off recently, but I'm still on the Colorado River Council, which has been great. And yes, it does tie to the programs that we offer. Sustainability studies, ecosystem science and stewardship, outdoor ed, outdoor recreation leadership, outlandish science, ski area operations, you name it. And you've seen it, and you're going to see our students in the poster session later. These are all part of our DNA. Our DNA is to protect these beautiful, incredible, fragile places, and our students are part of that, and they go into these great organizations to do that. Nathan mentioned most of these in my bio, so I won't go through them a whole lot. Just some affiliations, an opportunity to sort of bring to the college, and the college to bring to these organizations the opportunity to kind of cross-reference some of these things. I will say that the CMC was just invited literally about 2 weeks ago to be part of a national effort called This is Planet Ed, which is a higher education sustainability task force nationwide. Big names on this list, and there's Colorado Mountain College right on the list. So I think we have sort of proven ourselves as an organization that's serious about this work, and it's nice to be at the table. So as I mentioned, I've been on, like probably many of you, just because of these flows right now, I've been on the river quite a bit, and just in the last month. I thought I would just sort of kind of go through, and not that all of you don't know these rivers, and your rafters, and your anglers, and all that, so not to insult the fact that you've probably done some of these yourself, just thought I would share a story. So about a year ago, my husband and I and some friends were driving up to do the A, B, and C section of the green below Flaming Gorge. And sort of by accident, I had an email exchange with Matt Jost on something different. And he said, what are you doing this weekend? It was Memorial Day weekend last year. And he said, I said, well, we're getting ready to put in just below Flaming Gorge Dam, and we're going to do, because we hadn't done that yet. And of course, we had drawn an 8 ball like everybody else on river permits. So we were headed up there, and Matt says, you can't go. I'm like, why? We were literally like 20 minutes north of Bernal. He goes, they're doing a spike flow. And they just started to release it, and they're going up to 10,000 CFS as of tomorrow. All the shuttle companies have canceled, you can't go. And I had been watching every week, or every day, what are the flows, what are the flows, what are the flows. Anyway, so we turned around because we couldn't go. And Matt was nice enough, he and his family had to call an audible as well, and they were gonna run through Little Yampa Canyon, and they invited us to join them. So we had 3 days of food and a boat packed and everything else, and friends coming, and so we did Little Yampa Canyon, which was really fun. And Kent Bertrude talked about this a little bit yesterday. So this is a year ago. And I show this, there's my proof that I was with Matt. But we obviously know that at this time of year, these are these swollen, snow-fed, kind of muddy, murky rivers, right? And certainly the Little Yampa, runs through sort of rangeland, and you have the power plant in the background, and so you have this really interesting juxtaposition of all the things that you all talked about yesterday, right? Power generation, the needs of the river and how many use it, and how here we are at a water conference and there's water coming out of the sky. It's constantly in our face about, how stretched these rivers are and how nimble they have to be in order to serve us and also serve wildlife. It's a huge bald eagle's nest right there. And so thanks to Friends of the Yampa, and thanks to CPW and BLM and all the partners and the private landowners for making this runnable and for allowing people to use it and hopefully protect it again. I think once you're introduced to these really special places, you want to be part of helping protect them, and I'll come back to that in a minute with a different river. So this requires something to run it. Let's see if I can do that. I have a way to run this little video. I don't have my little cursor. Oh, you can see it up there. There you go. You can see it on the screen. So this is just a little stretch, just a little break. So again, just gives you an idea. We literally left power plant in the background, floating along, cattle operation, agriculture. It's a really interesting stretch of river if you haven't done it yet, just to get a sense of sort of all the juxtapositions of this. And obviously you can't do this river all year in rafts. You might be able to do it in smaller vessels. But it was an opportunity. So I'm going to come back to this in a minute. So a year later, we tried again. So this was a couple weeks ago. And I was smart enough to go, okay, don't do it over Memorial Day weekend. Because the reason that they had done that spike flow, and you all know this as well, is where were they sending the water? To Lake Powell. They were sending a huge amount of water to Lake Powell, and there was a purpose through U.S. Fish and Wildlife that there was a fish larvae that they also were required to do that spike flow. So again, you've got a call downriver, you've got fish needing this water release. Recreational boating is kind of thrown on its head, and it's just sort of this chaos, in this environment. So a couple of weeks ago, we thought we're going to do it again. I think we've tried 3 times to do this. So we decided we're going to go a little earlier in May and see if we can get this done. So we did that, May 12th weekend. And interestingly, it was running at 800 CFS. And we kept saying to ourselves, is it possible to run this river at 800 CFS? Like, could you really do this at 800 CFS? And everybody kept saying, yeah, it'll be low, it'll be a little scratchy, and all this kind of stuff, but yes, you can do it. So we headed up there. Why was it running at CFS, 800 CFS? Because they had done the big spike flow like a week prior. Because there's so much water in the system right now, and so much flowing down towards Lake Powell, they actually did it earlier because they didn't need sort of the higher flows over Memorial Day weekend for people that were doing kind of the Labyrinth Canyon and Cataract Canyon and all those. So there is some kind of intentionality around having enough water for recreation, and they didn't need it. So it was very, very, very low. And you'll see this in a moment. So of course we all know, Flaming Gorge Dam, that's what regulates what goes downstream. Lots of fishing, drift boats were getting in on the same day that we were. Sorry, I had to have a cute dog picture. That's crazy. But it was really low, very clear until we got to Red Creek, I think it's called. And then obviously the river was muddy. But really low and really clear. So such a juxtaposition to the Yampa. And the reason I'm going to show this one, this little video, sorry, I don't have a cursor on this. Let's see this. Oh, come on. So why do I show that? Because I got up one morning and I was going out to our raft to get some breakfast, and I hear all this rustling in the willows, and this scared this moose, and it ran all the way across the river. That is how low it was. I mean, literally bank to bank. It scared this moose across the river. So just to kind of get a sense of the difference, we know this, right? We know that we are in charge of this, and we are doing this to our river and to the river corridors, and certainly to the habitat that depend on it. So most recently, literally a couple of days ago, over Memorial Day weekend, you all know that the Dolores is running. And I brought some extra stuff from the Protect the Dolores. I know the film is here Friday, right? So River of Sorrows, if you haven't seen it yet, try to see it. I think it's Friday night here in Steamboat Springs. It was actually just in Basalt at Takaw. It's a couple of years old. Cody Perry, many of you know, is the producer of it, Rip to Flip. And it is a river that we're killing. We're literally killing this river, and you can see it on that on the film. But it was running 5,000-6,000 CFS about a week and a half ago, which is just sort of unheard of because McPhee Reservoir is full. Over Memorial Day weekend, they had the sense, however, whoever makes these decisions, the Dolores River Boating Association and a lot of the folks down there that are the equivalent of the organizations here, worked to bring that level down so that it was actually, quote, safely boatable. But we were still on 2,400 CFS, which was a lot. We could have literally done 50 miles a day if we had really needed to, which we almost had to because there were no campsites. It was so busy on the river. But it was flowing essentially at this, and this is really, really historic, protected, needs to be protected Dolores Canyon, archaeological sites, pictographs, all those kinds of things that we need to protect. So if you're interested in more of that, please see the film, or I think it is available online as well. Just the second picture is just to show you a little bit of the busyness on the river, and the cute dog photo, of course. So this is 2,400 CFS. We were running 5 miles an hour on a raft loading. So it was really, really nice. And you could see that, obviously this river, you can run it every, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, depending on kind of what the river flow is. This is what it normally looks like right now. It's pretty much dry. And it's because of McPhee. And you can see where McPhee is. And McPhee is not an energy producing dam. It's not for energy production. It is all for agriculture. And it was completed in 1985. Everything, all the allocations that we go into this massive drought, ranchers, farmers, recreationalists, nobody's getting what they were promised. And the agreement to put McPhee up was that recreational boating would be able to, continue. There would be sufficient flows, and there just haven't been. So if you are interested in this, and the parallels, that's what I'm going to bring it back to, is what we don't do to the Yampa. This is why this conference is so important, and it's why these dialogues are so important. It's why all of you are so important. I went on the Friends of the Yampa trip in 2018, and so just to look down into that beautiful place and see a wild flowing river, and to keep it wild, I just also want to say thank you. I want to say thanks to our team for being part of this. Thanks to Scripps, thanks to all of the partners for being part of this. So that we can continue to enjoy rivers, and we can also understand what we could do to rivers in these really fragile places if we're not really careful. So thank you for being here. I'll be around the rest of the day, and I'll turn it back to Nathan.
Thank you, Karen. Excellent. I'd like to now welcome my fellow steering committee member and colleague, Holly Kirkpatrick, to the stage to help introduce our first panel.
Thank you, Nathan. I actually can't think of a more perfect welcome to kick off this day 2 of the Yampa Basin Rendezvous. I hope that you're all excited for that. Again, my name is Holly Kirkpatrick. I am the Public Information and External Affairs Manager for the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District. As a first-generation college graduate from an Appalachian paper mill town recently ravaged by deadly flooding and an abrupt mill closure, I am truly honored to introduce a new conversation to this conference. This panel discussion, titled Preserving Communities and Culture Through Water Resiliency, is centered around the importance of water in the culture and economies of rural and indigenous communities. Our moderator for this discussion works as the Nature Conservancy's Freshwater Projects Director in Northwest Colorado and leads irrigation diversion modernization, climate adaptation, and riparian improvement projects throughout the Upper Colorado watershed, including the Yampa, White, and Dolores rivers. So without further ado, please welcome Jennifer Wellman.
Good morning. Great to see everyone. I have the honor of moderating an amazing panel of distinguished speakers who are going to cover an array of policy and practice about preserving communities and culture through water resiliency. We'll first hear from Beatrice Soto about her work throughout Colorado and Latino communities. Then Councilman Darwin Whiteman from the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe will discuss opportunities and challenges of water management and governance in southwestern Colorado. And finally, Celine Hawkins will share perspectives about her work in conservation and water policy that centers on effective partnerships with Native nations throughout the Colorado River Basin. I'd like to commend the Rendezvous Steering Committee and others for going beyond the standard water science of many conferences that we attend and really embracing and creating space for diverse perspectives in community-driven water management. Our panel today will truly embody the notion that water is life, agua es vida. And with that, I'd like to introduce Beatrice. Beatrice Soto has been at the intersection of community building, social justice, and working towards a stable climate for the past 2 decades. She's an award-winning architect with LEED certification who has worked on a variety of energy-related high-performance projects. She has also led and created professional and workforce development opportunities and workshops in the US and Mexico. Please welcome Beatrice.
Buenos dias. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm going to speak a little bit about the Colorado Latino Climate Justice Policy Handbook. This past year, we set a mission to try to figure out what is the reality of the Latino community in Colorado in the face of climate change, and what does it really mean for our community to adapt to a changing climate, to drought, to new forms of energy, and what does this specifically mean for Latinos across the state of Colorado. And face things in a way where we're not expecting community to live in a different way than they have historically, and head on reality and solutions that will address the reality of our communities. Historically, environmental policymakers have really failed to understand the intersection of conservation policy and the unique issues impacting Latino communities across the state of Colorado. This has really led to creation of policy solutions that continue to leave many in our community behind, and they don't address holistically the reality of all the people in Colorado. And at the end of the day, this perpetuates an unjust society. And as we've learned with COVID-19, we are only as strong as the most fragile person in our community. So if we have people in our community that are being left behind, we are all being left behind, and we need to understand that. So Protégete is an initiative of Conservation Colorado. Some of you might be familiar with Conservation Colorado. We work at the intersection of policy, politics, and people. So we play pretty heavily in elections, democracy work, all with a lens towards climate adaptation, environmental justice, and conservation. And we build power for communities and strengthen our democracy for the well-being of our environment. Something that was really important about our research was also understanding the historical context of how we got to where we are today and really bringing in historians into the conversations. Things do not happen in a vacuum. We cannot think about our current reality of climate, our current reality of social injustice and issues that we are all confronting without understanding the history and why we got to the place where we are. And what we really found is that Latinos, when Hispanics or Spaniards or people from Mexico, as you all know, we are a territory that used to be Mexican territory. There were strong relationships with indigenous communities, and it wasn't all cheery, but there was a lot of conservation ethos that the Latino community really adopted from indigenous communities. And we can see a lot of these practices in the San Luis Valley and how they managed the lands in this area. Latinos had historically even created documents of land management and how the land, the snow, how tree cutting, how the rivers, how irrigation was managed in these areas for drought. And as Latinos started to be removed from the state or the Constitution was refused to be in other languages, they slowly started to lose power alongside a lot of indigenous communities. So when we started this research, we really wanted to understand which communities are heavily Latino. Usually when we think about the Latino community, we just think about density, and we automatically go to cities. And we go to those like large density communities like Denver, Adams County, where you just see a lot of people. When we started thinking about this, we really wanted to understand which are the communities that have high proportions of Latino community, regardless of the numbers. Because what we really also wanted to understand is what is the political power of the community, and what are the overlaying environmental issues impacting these communities. So for example, we can see some communities that are very low in population, like Costilla, that have less than 2,500 population, but then you see the amount of Latinos that are in those communities, and it is above 55%. The state of Colorado currently is 20% Latino, and CMC is a Hispanic serving institution. As the Latino community has really grown around the recreation economy, the ski industry, and it's a vital part of the workforce to be able to run these industries. So we started trying to look at these numbers, so we're not just going to the high density areas of Latinos. And just to be frank too, these are different patterns over the past decades too. We have areas that we have historic Latino communities that have lived in Colorado since before it was a part of the United States, where the border crossed these communities. So these are definitely some of these communities, but we've also seen mass migrations from El Salvador, from Honduras, from Nicaragua, right? Political atmosphere globally impacts Colorado, impacts who lives here. The economy also changes where a community lives. We see a lot of new immigrants also starting to migrate to places of job sources, right? And as the recreation economy is booming, there is more need for workforce. So then we tend to see a different type of Latino, and it's more of an immigrant profile in places like the Roaring Fork Valley, around the Vail Valley, and a lot of these hubs of recreation economies. So then what we did is map out the counties where we see a lot of these high Latino communities. And we started to map out where are our communities and start to identify these areas. And then we're going to compare, and we're going to start to overlay these maps with drought, impaired waterways, climate pollution, oil and gas, understanding housing, language, demographics. What do the health services look like in these communities? How does political representation look like? So this is kind of how we start our research, and I'm going to focus a little bit on water today, but there's a lot of information on a lot of different issues in the studies that we've been doing. One of the main things we looked at is the energy crisis, housing, and transportation. And I'm just going to show a couple of information relative to climate and energy and housing that is relevant to water. So this is a map of the climate pollution in the state of Colorado. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to really see where oil and gas operations are in our state. And you can see where the Latino communities are and where climate pollution is. Part of fracking, part of the liquids that they use in fracking is PFAS, which is a forever chemical. And a lot of these communities depend on water wells. So we can start to see where these high concentrations of pollution, that's the water. Then we can look at soil pollution, and then we can also look at air pollution, right? Ozone, methane, all of these other point sources of pollution are happening in the same communities. I don't know if you're familiar with this term, but they're called sacrifice zones. These are the sacrifice zones in Colorado. Then when we look at housing, it's really important to understand that 1 in every 5 households that is owned by a Latino is a mobile home. 1 in every 5. 20% of housing, Latino housing, is actually a mobile home. These same communities are renters. We're disproportionately renters as well. So when we think about water solutions, climate solutions, we really have to think about where does this community live. When you're thinking about a single-family home, you're missing a lot of people in Colorado. So when we think about policy, it's really important to meet people where they are and address the reality of these communities and not jump over them. When we look at the population, despite being 20% of the community, 50% of the people in Colorado, 50% of Latino families or families in Colorado experiencing poverty are Latino. The same with the amount of people that are homeless and families with children that are homeless, disproportionately are Latino as well. What's important here too is that Latinas tend to be also the higher population being pregnant, and we are also disproportionately children. This is important because when we think about levels of pollution and how much pollution our bodies can take, it's obviously very different when a full-grown adult can take an amount of pollution than a small child. And for example, for a baby, 80% of their diet is water. So when water is polluted and 80% of your diet is water, that is a huge amount of pollution for a very small body that is intaking and that will have permanent damage for the rest of their lives. So what do we think about when we think about water justice? So for us, it's the concept of having access to clean, safe, affordable water as a fundamental human right. And this is essential for a healthy population, environment, and economy. In the US and Colorado, many communities, particularly those that are low income and communities of color, are underserved, including Latinos. Unlike other groups, these communities lack access to safe, affordable water, drinking water, and their culture is not part of the solutions. And this is why going back to the conversation of culture is so important. When we achieve water justice, we will achieve an inclusive, community-based forms of water management that are developed, and we address the health of the environment and the community alongside each other. So when we mapped, and we did all our mapping, we also mapped where are the areas in Colorado that are more at risk of flooding, and which are the communities that have the most impaired waterways. And we overlap those same maps with where we've identified these high Latino counties. So what we're finding is that more of the pollution and more of the risk of flooding are in Latino communities. This is really important because when we have communities that do not have political power, that do not have a voice in the solutions, we will not come up with solutions that will actually be able to address the needs of all communities. Something that we experience, and I live in the Roaring Fork Valley, something we experienced in the Roaring Fork Valley is when we had the Lake Christine fire 4 years ago, emergency communication did not know that the community spoke Spanish. Wildfire emergency communications were only in English, as we are a monolithic community that do not speak several languages. That is a life and death situation. When we look at the places where we're going to have flooding and we do not understand the languages of those communities, we are literally putting people at risk, and we are not doing our homework to address holistically how do we do emergency management for these communities. And this overlays with water and flooding and drought, wildfires, and the reality is climate change is real. There will be unexpected natural disasters, and we are not as resilient as we think we are if we're not protecting every member in our community. We also looked at water violations. So high Latino counties account for 35% of the state of Colorado. And in these same counties, 44% of groundwater is the source for water. So these are not municipal systems, these are not county systems that treat water. These communities depend highly on well water. Well water is regulated really different in the state of Colorado. We try to see the information of what are the wells made of, how old are they. That information is not available. So how do we even create policy when we're not even collecting the data? And I showed you the pollution map where oil and gas is. We're not regulating those wells, so community is drinking a different type of water. And what we also found is that there is a higher concentration, again, of oil and gas and more drinking from well. That is, that's how community is receiving their water. And then when we looked at water violations, we saw that 88% of water violations in the state of Colorado are in the same counties. So these are not meeting the federal water standards. This is here in Colorado, and we are really missing the mark on and failing these communities. We also tried to understand flooding and then drought. What does drought look like in these communities? Which are the communities that are the most at risk of drought? We can see that heavy green line again. Those are the high Latino communities, and we are starting to see that there are specific areas in the state of Colorado that are more prone to drought. They experienced 98 more weeks of drought in the last decade. So when we think about America the Beautiful, when we think about where are we going to put these big federal investments, which communities should we be prioritizing, and which are the most vulnerable areas in Colorado, we can start to identify these areas, and we can start to direct the funds and make sure that the resiliency and these historic investments are shared across the state of Colorado, and that we are not just pulling them into the communities that have more resources, that they have the lawyers, the environmental groups have been established in these areas, and they can really fight for these areas, but that we're actually fighting across the state for the resiliency of every community in the state of Colorado. We also looked at heat illnesses related to drought. Why is this important to our community? Because our community works disproportionately outside. We are outdoor workforce. We do landscaping, construction, warehouses, transportation. We looked at the sectors in the economy where our community works. And then we also looked at who has access to health care, insurance, all of these. I'm not going to present all this information. But I really wanted to share this as well as who is being hospitalized because of extreme heat and why this is so important to our community. I'm going to pivot really quickly to
Almost 40% of mobile home residents don't believe that their water is good enough for drinking.
quality of water. I think that's the biggest issue that we encounter right now.
The water quality here in the mobile home park, it's really bad. The smell, the taste.
And it's such a huge necessity for anyone, even outside of drinking. You use it to wash your hands, to cook, to shower, to brush your teeth.
If we want to cook with it, we have to boil it first, or if we're going to shower with it, there's a lot of health concerns that relate to it.
It's been like this and it just feels like it's getting worse.
Many residents are forced to use the park's water, which can lead to health concerns.
I was actually told by the doctor that the reason why I have scalp is because I use the water.
You know, we hear stories as like, oh, I get really bad rashes when I shower, or I get really bad allergic reactions where I feel dirty. And I myself experienced like getting cavities or worsening teeth conditions despite taking care of your teeth. And feeling like the more you take care of them, the worse it gets.
Even if I use different shampoos, different things, it's not going to help because the water is not going to change. It hasn't changed.
It's to the point where it's actively harming youth, it's actively harming the adults in the community, and you just will never be able to afford as much water loss as you need to shower.
To the quality of water that is near the mobile home parks, my family and I have led to the expense of buying water filters.
I have to buy water to cook, to feed my dogs water, pretty much for everything.
We couldn't just turn on the faucet and drink the water. We would have to constantly go to the store to buy water.
Monthly, it's hard to buy the water, so I just have to think about what I need.
It was financially burdening to the point where my family genuinely didn't know what they were going to do. So on weekends there'd be food scarcity, or one of my parents would eat so that I would eat it.
Or families are choosing between clean water and food.
It is pretty tough.
This has been an issue that we've seen for many years.
I grew up here, and it has always been a problem. It has never changed.
It's very clearly, like, very terrible for the majority of people.
And it's time that we fix it now. Support HB 23-1257.
So this is a piece of policy we took on this year because we wanted to focus on solutions for the Latinx community that we have been hearing about for decades. This is a very unique type of housing situation because they do not own the land beneath them, they only own the home. They're called mobile homes, but you can't really move them. And I just wanted to kind of share, we partnered with the School of Public Health to map where all the mobile home parks, there's 800 in the state of Colorado. In the Roaring Fork Valley, for example, I think we have 55, and approximately 30,000 people live in mobile home parks. You can kind of see a little bit about the area here specifically, and we did meet with Sleepy Bear, a resident in Sleepy Bear, and we heard a similar story, that her pet would not drink the water in the mobile home park. And I was a commissioner on the Environmental Justice Action Task Force, and we fought really, really hard that even though, for example, this community is not considered a disproportionately impacted community, that we should look at mobile home parks as an environmental justice issue and make sure that we are addressing mobile home parks in pockets that they're surrounded by wealthy communities, because we see this close to Aspen, we see this in Edwards, we see this in Vail, and this is part of your community as well. We have heard from people in this community, in mobile home parks, that they do not have access to clean water. Again, these are little pockets, and sometimes when I tell people in Aspen that this is a reality, it blows their mind, because it's not their lived experience. They don't have to drink that water. But we heard from people from Boulder and Leadville, and when you think of environmental justice, you might think about Commerce City, you might think about Pueblo. You usually don't think about environmental injustice in mountain resort communities, but this is a reality. So what we took away from our mapping exercise for the School of Public Health is, and what we did is we measured where there is violations of the Safe Drinking Water Act around 5 miles around mobile home parks. And we found a lot of water violations that are not meeting the federal standards around these communities specifically. And the demographics of these communities are senior citizens above the age of 65, veterans, people with disability, and the Latinx community. These are the most vulnerable people in our society, live in this type of housing, and it is imperative that we figure out how we can address and make sure that every single person in Colorado has access to clean water. Again, what's really interesting is that these are secondary water standards. So in the state of Colorado, it is okay for you to have red, stinky water, and it meets the standards. This is meeting our water standards currently, and we have accepted this as a reality. So I'm just going to jump through this kind of quickly. I also wanted to share that buying bottled water is 3 times more expensive than it is just receiving your municipal water. And a lot of these communities are actually paying for their water. So they're paying for their water from their tap, and then they have to go and buy plastic. There you go. Water in plastic bottles, and then you're producing more trash, and it's this vicious cycle, right, of pollution. And then, I don't know if you see this, but usually when you go to the store, you see a lot of Latino community buying like these large tanks of water, and you're like, why are they doing this? Well, this is why community is doing this. And because they have been ignored for so long, it also creates a mistrust in your government, in your agencies, and further isolation from the democratic process. And something that we've really been thinking about too is like, what are the natural pollutants, and how is climate change going to impact the water that these communities are receiving, growing more bacteria as the temperature gets warmer, drought, and where we're pulling our water from, and then also the pollution in the air and the sediments that go into the water. Like, all of this is related, right? We cannot try to pretend that one thing does not impact another thing. And then really understanding that these communities are particularly susceptible to water quality issues after the aftermath of wildfires and flooding events. Water quality gets worse, and they do not have the infrastructure to be able to address how this impacts water quality in this type of housing. So then also when we start to map which communities are more likely to have these type of natural disasters, these are the same communities, so we know exactly where we're going to have a lot of water issues. So we're also trying to figure out what does it look like for solutions for these communities. How do we make sure that the health, water security, and economic prosperity is part of the solution for the Latino communities across the state of Colorado. I also want to share this really quickly. It's really important to recognize that the Latino community, when we poll our community, it is the community that is the most in favor of conservation efforts, addressing drought. They believe in climate change. They want to see clean energy investments. They want to see our government help transition to clean energy future. So it's a natural ally in making sure that we pass policy and that we elect the right people that will help us address these issues. So this is also really interesting. The part of our community that every time we poll, they poll the highest. We can look at Yale University polls on climate messaging, and the Latino community across the country is the community that polls the highest in terms of supporting transitioning to clean energy, addressing drought, and believing in climate change. They're not climate deniers. What happens is, unfortunately, this is a part of our community that is very disenfranchised by design from the political system, regardless being one of our strongest allies for addressing these issues as well. And I just want to share that through all our data collection, we worked on this project for over a year, and a lot of the data is, we had to use the census because a lot of the data is collected differently from different agencies. A lot of agencies do not collect information. And when you do not collect information, you erase the reality of these communities. And then the census too has been proven to be like a 5% error. That error is in Black, Indigenous, Latino communities. So again, we know even to this point that there's lack of information. A lot of the data too, you had to pay for it, or it came in expensive Excel sheets that we had, spend days and hours going through the data to be able to put it on a map. So this is work that too is really hard for community or for even us as researchers to figure out what does this data look like and how much time and effort we have to put into really understanding this information. Okay, well, thank you, and I'll just leave it to the next panelist as well.
Sobering information and really important to underscore the importance of equity and justice that has to be front and center in our work throughout the state, throughout the country and the world in watershed stewardship, drinking water protection, and for me, I feel like how we do our work is as important as the work that we're doing. So communities that are disenfranchised or underrepresented need to be part of our consideration. And I think Councilman Whiteman is next up, and we'll talk about his work with the Mountain Ute tribe. Darwin Whiteman Jr. is an elected councilman representative of the Mountain Ute tribe. In addition to tribal council duties, Mr. Whiteman is also a member of the Native American Bank Board, Native American Finance Officers Association, and Southwest Regional Bureau of Indian Affairs Budget Committee. Welcome, Councilman. Thank you.
Mike Dewitskus, Nananita, Darwin Whiteman Jr. Just want to say good morning, talk to you my language. I'm a member of the Ute Mountain Ute tribe, elected official. My background is law enforcement. I used to be a police officer with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, worked for the Montezuma County Sheriff's Office. I was an EMT intermediate for 15 years. Investigations unit with the gaming office, with the casino. So my background is public safety. So today, and I'm an elected official, I'm one of the councilmen. I'm on my second term right now. I don't know why I reran, but I reran. And, to be an elected official, I have learned a lot. More than I thought I knew. I thought I went around the block 22 times, but being in this elected official business, you see things you could never imagine, and I always say anybody running for an elected official position, you don't know. You really don't know what you're bargaining for. I always say you see this little box in front of you and that's all you see until you get in, then it's 30, 40 times bigger than you, all the way around you, far as you can see. And it takes you for a ride. You think you're going to take it for a ride? No, it takes you for a ride. And you go to all these different things that life gives to you. And this is one of them. The good people here, good to see you, good to meet you. First time setting eyes on you, and same with you to me. So we always believe in life there's a crossroads. Today it's a crossroads to see one another. Down the road we're going to see one another somewhere. When the Creator Himself makes that possible. We always look at things. How far can we see on the other side of the hill? We predict, we plan, we go to school, we learn everything we can learn to see what tomorrow holds. But we can never get that far. We can get a few pieces of it, but If the Creator wanted us to see that, He would have made it possible. It's not possible. So we try to do what we can do today. And today, everybody here, I always say people speak a language of their own. And this is one of them. Speaking of the water language. In and out, what it holds, what schools teach you, the tools on your belt you earn, that's what you have, the different departments you work, how far you go into water, what it's about. When I normally don't attend the water meetings. My colleague, Councilman Selwyn Whiteskunk, he's on our water board. He lays that in and out, and he can speak your language like nobody's business. But me, I come from the financial part and the background of law enforcement, and so coming here is foreign. It's a foreign language for me. And I was thinking, what do I say? What do I say to them? These guys been around way up here. They went to school, 23, 24 degrees, doctor's degrees. Me, I just got what I know. But I start thinking more. I belong to the Cattle Owners Association. I'm one of the liaisons on the tribal council to the people of the tribe, the cattle owners. So when they talk about water, I was looking around, this is my first time being here. Good, beautiful country here. I always learned, our people before me, Mountain Ute people, the Utes, this was their land before. They roamed this area, their traditional land, their traditional hunting grounds, all of Colorado. Till you get almost to the eastern border, they would call that the edge of the world. The end of the world as they knew it. Because they didn't go beyond, they stayed in that realm that was the edge of the world. If you went over, you went to the unknown. So when the foreigners came, even the different tribes that were foreign to them, they fought for their land. That was their life, their livelihood. And today, we hear that today. It goes on today. Because what do we have today? We have water rights. We have water partitions. We have different agencies and entities and different groups fighting for water. Hey, that's my water, that's my water, that's mine. Sometimes we get so caught up, we get lost within our own self, within our own mind, within our own things that we deal with, our own people. We all get lost somewhere. But as the Creator, the Lord, as we call, the Lord is the Creator of all things on this earth. He even made earth. So in what He created was water. Water is an element on this earth. So precious, there can be no life without water. We get back to that. There's no life without water. That's the truth. You always hear the Native Americans, oh, water is life. Water. That's what that really means to everybody, not just Native Americans, to everybody. Our animals, our plants, there's no life without water. That's the very truth. We have to get back to that. How do we go forward without water? We can't. So there's these bridges in life we build, these bridges in our duties that we uphold, that we build. And bridges take a long time to build like any other bridge. But in one instance, they could be torn down that fast. Like any bridge, it can be torn down that fast. So we always be careful of where we step, of how we talk, who we talk to. We're reminded every day, I learned this, that at the end of your tongue, you don't know, there's a razor blade. You can slash anybody you want. You can slash anything you want with that. So you always be careful what you say, how you say it, how you come across these bridges you make. So that's what I've learned, coming up and looking at what water, how important is our water? As I was driving up the other day and I was looking around, so on our land we have 680,000 acres of Ute Mountain land. We span into 3 states, Colorado, our main state, New Mexico, and Utah. We have a satellite community south of Blanding, Utah. They call it White Mesa, Utah. It's Ute Mountain land. So there, we have a community, and our tribal membership is around 2,200 plus members. We have our main community in south of Cortez, Colorado. It's in Toyac. Community is probably about 2,500 people live in that community. And about 1,000 members live there. 1,000 plus live off the reservation. So we don't have a town in New Mexico. We have land there. We have agriculture. We have our livestock that are in New Mexico. So south of Toyac, it's almost desert. It's a desert area. When you get on top of the Ute Mountain, you can look south, you see the desert. You look north, you see the forest. That's home to us. So when I was driving up here, looking around, I seen this beautiful green rain. I was like, wow. I was looking at your pictures you were showing when the moose was running across, and you seen all these, the water so low, but you look at the background, still green. Where we come from, it's not like that. When it's dry, it's dry. You're in a desert, and up here, we always say you be thankful of where you come from. Be thankful of everything you get. And we see that today. We always see that today with that. The people aren't thankful. But you go back in time, their folks before them was very thankful. And before them, there's always practices of our families that gave everything they could give. A meal served with people was way beyond anybody could give. And that's what is still practiced today, not with Native Americans, but with everybody you see. Everybody that holds the respect in their heart. You see that all over. So, just kind of giving a brief where I come from, where I've been, what I've seen, and then your land here, all the greens that's on it. Beautiful place. Has the cattle owners, some been in generations. They talk about back in time. They talk about the lands, how simple they know the land, how they address the land, how it needs to be taken care of, the management of the lands. They have that in place today. They talk of the lands, when they see the green, they always say, that's the groceries for our animals on the ground. That's their groceries. And I was looking at our groceries and I thought, wow, when I came here, I seen all this green. I thought, wow, that's Costco. So where we come from, that's a little trading post. Because it's so barren and so not as green as here. And today, it's green where we come from, but it's not as green as here. So that's why I always say, be thankful for what you have. We hear all these complaints. We don't have this. We don't have that. We don't have this. We learned that ever more so during COVID. When COVID came, it was a slap in the face. It was an eye-opener. It was something we never ever heard of. At that time, we had a logistics team, incident command team we formed. So when we formed that team, I was commander of the logistics, where do we get our food? Because what happened during COVID? No toilet paper, no water, no food, no whatever every day you use wasn't as plentiful. So when that happened, what do we do? What do we do? And everybody was against the wall looking at each other. What is Montezuma County doing? What's LaPlata County doing? What's Southern Youth doing? What's Navajo doing? What are they doing? What are we doing? Everybody's against the wall. What do we do? What do we do? What's Denver doing? What are they doing? That's what it was. So in order to we had to blaze a trail somewhere. And I thought, well, we're going to go. I don't care where we're going. We're going. Even if we go in a ditch, we're going. We're going to move. So we did. And again, water came up. Water was a big issue at the time because the drought came. Heavy, times 10. The drought was so powerful that, we get our water, we have water rights. We get our water from McPhee Reservoir. In 2021, the drought was so powerful, we only got out of 100%, we got 10%. We have a farm and ranch that we have behind the mountain, RU Mountain. We farm 7,000 acres. We have 200 pivots. So at that time, our water was cut to 10%, and we only had 10 pivots going. So everything came to a standstill. However, north of Cortez, the farmers, they had 80%. And we asked that question, why? Well, I didn't ask. They were glad I wasn't there. I would have went all out. I would have took my gloves off and stood on that table and asked that question. So I didn't. They kind of pushed me in the background and they asked. So when they did that, there was a lot of issues. We still had to pay for what we normally pay for 100%. They made us pay the full 100%, even though we only got 10%. So at that time, we were struggling, but we made things happen just as everybody else did. Everybody here did something at that time. Everybody, your agencies you deal with, that you uphold, you made it happen. No matter what, there was a way you had to move. You had to make a progress forward because, as I learned, people depend on all of us. People depend on every one of you, including your family. Not only your family, but our animals. Our animals are dear to us. They depend on us as well. The land itself depends on us. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? How are we going to make it happen? And we have to move forward. There's no time to stand still. You can do that. You can stand still. But the train always moves. The train of life always moves forward, stops for no man. You got to make that happen. So we did during COVID times, during our drought times. And, we looked way ahead. Okay, so since we've seen the drought, what do we do now? What if we have another drought? What's coming next year? What's coming the year after? Somebody asked a question yesterday, can you predict 50 years from now? No, you can't. It's the reality. It would be great if we did, then we would know a lot to know. We would be the money-making people because all these countries would come to us and say, what's happened in 50 years in our country? We would make money. But not so. The Creator makes it happen that way for a reason. So with that, we look ahead. Okay, so we implemented dry farming right now. We're testing all what we could do. We have internship programs with our students and our children. Because right now in our workforce on the tribe, on the reservation, there's departments that exist, but you only know what you know within the tribe. The TIPO office, Tribal Historical Preservation Office. They go throughout the state of Colorado and different states that they find remains of Native American people, and they rebury them. They test them to see if they're Ute, mountain Ute. They were going to the boarding schools now that had burials of Ute Mountain children back in over 100 years ago. So they're doing that testing now. So right now in that program, we have one of our elders that is ready to retire. So how do you replenish what he knows? His knowledge that he knows. He retires, who's going to go over there to know what he knows? So in our community, we're restructuring. So with COVID had brought, yes, a lot of bad things. However, we had to see these things to understand where are we going from here. We made a platform to stand on where we're going from here because it was an eye-opener. If we didn't have that, we would still be having a grand old time, having lollygagging around, doing what we do. But since the eye-opener came, we have to understand where we're going to go from here. The drought came with it. What are we going to do? So that's why our implications are grand at this time. We're looking at a broad picture. Instead of the little picture, we look at everybody across the board. And that's including everybody here. And with your help, how far do we go? I always believe there's always a foundation we lay. A foundation of writing, policies and procedures, and the constitutional writings, those are foundations. Constitutions within local governments, foundings of whatever it may be, all those are the foundations of writing. Now to grasp them and implement them with the people, as it's always said, and it was said once before, I never understood this. But they said, we have a resource that's very resourceful, very powerful, more than anything could be. And everybody has it. Everybody knows it. But they don't know what it is. Some do, some don't. And it's the people themselves. It's the people you serve. It's the people that you work for. The people that are in your community. Their lives, they're so important. We forget life itself. That's why I say we get lost in our mind. We get lost in everyday dealings. So that's why this morning when I greeted you in my language. Good morning. And it's good to be here. It's good that all of us, we have a gift. The Creator gives gifts out all the time. Every day. He gives gifts of knowledge, gifts of understanding, gifts to artists that can make art, gifts to people that craft, gifts to people to talk and to understand. He also gives a gift of life. We were born, every one of us was born to this world. When we're born to today, we look further. And we always say that at the time of our birthday, yay, happy birthday, yay, happy birthday, many more years to come, yay. That's what we wish for. We want that because we have a love for ourselves and for our people, our children. And when we have that, all these elements come in place. And water is one of them. The gift of water. No man can make water. No, it's not possible. The Creator, that's how powerful water is. Like our life, it's so powerful. So water can give us life, and it can take life. That's how powerful it is. So, I just elaborated into what the things that we forget, the little things in life that makes the foundation of which we stand on today. In our ceremonial ways, water's way up here. We have ceremonies that certain times of the hour, we pray for this water. We talk about this water, how precious it is. At that time, we drink this water. And we thank that water, thank you, water. We pour some on the ground for the people that don't have water, for the people that struggle to have good water to drink. That's why we do that. We look at the people who pour water on the ground, so they always have water. Whatever they're fighting for their water, their right of water, the Creator will see it through. That's why we do that. We pour that water. We don't always think of ourselves. We pray all the time in ceremony, every day. We forget about us. We forget to say something about us. Us, somewhere somebody's going to think about us, but it's okay. We look for the people, for the foundation of life. So in our ceremonies, that's how we gather and we take care of this water. One of our ceremonies is called the sun dance. Each tribe, different tribes have sun dance. They come way back in time. They're very sacred. They don't allow just anybody to go to them. In your sun dance, there's a way to go in. Before you go in, you have these dreams. They call them visions. They come to you. And you see yourself, what you're doing. All different angles of what you see. In your sun dance, you go in for 4 days and 4 nights. You have no water. You have no food. And they sing these certain songs, and you pray. And you pray, and you pray, and you cleanse yourself. Every time the sun comes up in the morning, you face that sun, and you dance to that sun. And you talk to that sun about what this life's about. How precious this water is. So today, you really, when you go through the sun dance, I've been through it. You know how precious this water is. When you see people with bottles of water throwing them away, you say, no, don't do that. You don't do these things. You learn how precious water is. What it gives, what life it gives to everything on this earth. So, what we're going to do here, we're going to move forward. What needs to be done, we're going to make it happen. That's what needs to be done instead. And I always say in our council meetings, why do we keep talking about this? Put it down on writing and make it happen. Why would the next council meeting we're going to be singing the same old song? Why? Make it happen. No more beating around the bush. So here today, what needs to be done, we'll get it done. I know I kind of strayed away from all my facts here, but if you have any questions, ask me. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being here, and me too. And we're going to move forward. Whatever needs to be done, we'll take care of it. So thank you.
How are we on time? Good. Great. I love the idea of speaking multiple languages of water. And for the scientists here, maybe, consider that. Speak the language of water from your heart. Consider the utilities and the drinking water protectors and the water warriors out there. It's an awesome concept of just multiple languages of water. So, there we are with Celine. Great to see you. Celine Hawkins is a conservation professional and attorney with experience in Colorado River and tribal water and natural resource management. She serves as the Nature Conservancy's Colorado River Tribal Partnerships Program Director, where she leads the Conservancy's efforts to effectively and ethically partner with tribal nations and indigenous people on freshwater conservation projects in the Colorado River Basin. And I have the pleasure of working with Celine as well, so she is offering some perspectives this morning. Good morning, Celine, from afar.
Good morning, Jennifer. And good morning to all of you. I really apologize that I just couldn't swing being there in person. I can't believe I passed up an opportunity to come to your beautiful basin up there in the Yampa. And I'm here in Durango, Colorado this morning. So it's such a pleasure for me to have listened to our last two panelists who are really asking some hard questions about who is centered and who is left out as we meet some pretty serious challenges throughout the Colorado River Basin. So I'm going to build off of that and talk at a Colorado River Basin scale about some of our work with tribal nation partners. Bear with me. So I know that rivers are flowing high this year and we're all grateful for the incredible snowpack that we have. But for the last 10 or so years in my career, I have seen so many instances of our headwaters forests burning, the tributaries of the Colorado River running dry. I've observed fish kills and ash flows from my kayak. I have walked boats down increasingly long boat ramps into our rivers. And unfortunately, these aren't rare or isolated events, and they may just be the start of what we have to come in an increasingly dry future for the Colorado River. And so the work that I do is really focused on what water management in this basin is going to look like for nature and people. I think you all know this, but the Colorado River Basin is really a lifeline for the West, and it's really under any measure that you would think of to look at a river basin. If you're looking at irrigated crops, a recreation economy, 40 million people, 7 states, 2 countries, 30 tribal nations. This incredible river supports so much, and it's not just people. We have incredible fish and wildlife and other species that are reliant on the health of this basin that are at risk as we are suffering from increasing water stress. If you've read a newspaper in the last year or two, you probably know that this basin is in an unprecedented crisis. We're enduring the driest period in the basin in more than 1,200 years, and we've seen flows decline nearly 20% since 2000. So we are really challenged in managing water throughout the Colorado River Basin. The story that I think has just begun to be told in the last few years is that there are 30 tribal nations in the Colorado River Basin today. These nations have the legal rights to somewhere between 20 and 30% of the water in the Colorado River Basin. And that number is anticipated to rise as more tribal nations quantify their water rights and as the overall supply in the basin diminishes. These water rights are often very powerful. They're often senior priority water rights, or they're contract water in federal storage reservoirs throughout the basin. So even though tribal nations control a huge amount of the water in the basin, they have been largely excluded from policy and governance discussions for about the past 100 years of governance in the basin. This has resulted in water management decisions that don't fully recognize tribal water and natural resource governance, and that are also failing to identify tribal nations and the solutions that we're building for the basin. The good news is that in the last few years, this has started to change, and I'll cover that in a few minutes. The last point I want to make here is that, that's a big number, 20 to 30% of the supply in the basin. But tribal nations have not developed into their full supplies, largely due to the nature of how these water rights are quantified and lack of access to funding for infrastructure to deliver water. So tribal nations throughout the Colorado River Basin right now are making critical decisions about how they will develop their water at a time that we're all doing some belt tightening and thinking about how we'll do more with less. Our demand is already outstripping supply in the basin, as you can see in this slide. And this will be my last technical slide, I promise. We're forecasted to see some pretty big development of tribal water. This is showing you the forecasted water development in the upper basin. I know it's a little complicated, but the takeaway is that about half of the forecasted depletions that could be developed in the upper basin alone are that piece of tribal water. So what tribal nations do now as they're making decisions about how their water will be developed is a huge piece of what the future will look like throughout the Colorado River Basin. So that's a pretty sobering picture of what we're facing. Not only are we in crisis in the basin, we have huge quantities of undeveloped tribal water that may come online. And so what do we do now? Well, we need to be developing all the tools in the toolbox and engaging every water user in the basin to find solutions to the crisis that we're in. We need to start acting now to secure a future for the Colorado River that benefits people and the rest of nature. Speaking specifically about our partnerships with tribal nations in the basin, we're working and exploring how we're going to find solutions together. We're in a time of change in the basin. I think I have a slide somewhere that has a list of all the historic meetings that have occurred between tribal nations and state principals and federal agencies just in the last 2 years. And it's a long slide. There's been a ton of meetings. We are in the thick of trying to figure out how tribal nations can have meaningful inclusion in governance processes throughout the Colorado River Basin. So here's a sign that the future won't be like the past, and tribal nations are going to be a big part of figuring out the future of the Colorado River Basin. Another big part of my work is really trying to test what these projects and solutions are going to look like with tribal partners. So in the San Juan River Basin, I've been working for the past few years on a really innovative project. It's a cross-boundary basin, and we're working with the New Mexico Interstate Stream Commission and the Hickory Apache Nation on a water sharing agreement that's taking water that was previously leased for coal-fired power production and is now releasing that water for both compact compliance and endangered species recovery purposes. This was a really, really complicated agreement to negotiate, but it's one of those sort of win-win-win. Everybody wins in this situation. It took an extraordinary amount of effort to do, but I'm happy to report that I'm sitting here on the banks of the Animas River today, which is sort of flirting with peaking, and water is being released from Navajo Dam into the main stem of the San Juan River. We're going to be able to extend that peak release by at least 2 days with the water that we've secured under this agreement, doing great things for the river and also testing tools that we might need in the future for compact compliance. It's these kind of ideas and innovative solutions that I think are going to be a big part of the future of the Colorado River Basin. It's going to be important that tribal communities, rural communities, cities are all finding the solutions that work in the places that they live. And I'm really excited about this work moving forward. I want to take a second to talk about how we work, given what we've heard today about some deep inequities that exist in tribal and other communities in Colorado. Relationship building is really, really important in this work. And as part of that, I every day have to acknowledge that our partners on the tribal side are incredibly busy. Tribal leaders are dealing with literally every issue that a government official could deal with all at the same time. The staff is busy, so there's limited capacity to engage, and that's an issue that we're working on throughout the Colorado River Basin. The other thing I'd invite you to do is to think about what we heard from the councilman today about sort of what the future might look like and what our priorities are. I think when we take time to listen to our tribal partners, we might find really new and exciting ideas and approaches for how we're going to get ourselves out of the mess that we're in the Colorado River Basin. So I'll end with a note that I live in the Colorado River Basin, and some days I get really stressed thinking about what life is going to look like for my kid in the future. On those days, I also reflect on how many of us are working really hard to keep our communities and rivers safe. It's going to take all of us, from ranchers to municipal water providers to tribal communities, to get through this. And I guess what gives me a little comfort is that there's not a single way to fix this crisis, but that's okay. Because different things are going to work in different places and different communities. And the important thing is that we start doing the work now. Thank you so much.
That was loud, sorry. So I think we have a few minutes for questions, and I think instead of going through a list of questions, I'm going to open it to the audience first. And just want to kind of highlight the learning to do more with less concept, something that we all need to learn from and perhaps consider Latino communities and indigenous communities' approaches to conservation, to drinking water protection, to all sorts of water-related governance and social equity issues that they're confronting that often is left to them to figure out, and how can we work together to make it more equitable for all throughout the whole country, and really throughout Colorado. So, anyone have a question for our panelists today?
I got it.
Great.
I really appreciate all of the awesome presentations in this panel. My question is for Beatrice about the bill that passed, HB 23, 1257. Could you talk a little bit about that bill seems very what kind of pushback you received when fighting for that bill to be passed, and a little bit more about how that process worked?
Yeah, so we were able to secure $4 million for testing. It was a very tight budget this year, and we also have Tabor in the state of Colorado, so funding a lot of social programs has to be approved by taxpayers, which makes it pretty complicated. But the idea is that over the next 4 years, we will get to a point where we test every single mobile home in the state of, mobile home park in the state of Colorado, and we have a better understanding of what are the water issues that are particular to each community, because they're not the same. So right now, what we were able to pass is just the testing, and then the next phase will be implementation. This is really tricky because it's private property, and we usually don't want to put public funds towards improving private property. So I think a lot of the solutions will also be at a community level, and communities coming together at a local level to support the workforce that are these type of mobile home parks, or also going to housing authorities or the community buying the mobile home park, or helping the people that live there own it. So this is a long-term process, but at least we're going to get a sense of what the water sources are for these different communities, because the state wasn't even able to give us this information if they're connected to a municipal water system or well water. That the information is just lacking. So this is just the beginning.
Thanks, Beatrice. This is in relation to what you were just talking about, the sacrificial zones that contaminate the water. I live part-time in Wyoming and Pinedale area, and they came in with those gas wells like crazy, and that little town had no defenses. Everybody embraced those damn companies, and they were not held accountable for anything. And what Pinedale didn't know, what a lot of small communities don't know, is that they have to have that testing done in advance of these gas drilling projects and coal bed methane, because if not a standard well test, it's not for coliform and stuff, it's for all the benzenes and hydrocarbon stuff that they use in the fracking process, and that's a very expensive test to do. And, there's no fracking in Broward County right now, I don't think, but when the gas drilling was coming to Moffett County, a bunch of us from the Pinedale area, we went down and talked to people in Moffett County, and they said, we don't want to hear anything bad about the gas companies because they're giving us jobs. And, they roll into town with these big checks and they give them to all the nonprofits to make them look like the good boys, but they're just the devil, and they are ruining our water resources. But thank you both for your work.
Hi, thank you so much for all of these wonderful talks. I was wondering if there's any collaboration between the ski resorts and some of these issues, because it seems, this is a problem across the West next to ski resorts, where there's these really wealthy companies and wealthy folks living by these resorts, and then communities that don't have access to clean water right next door, and it seems like there should be some accountability there.
Well, I agree with you. I think Pitkin County, where Aspen is where we have the most disparity between the rich and the poor in the state of Colorado, and a lot of times we don't look at these communities through that lens. And that's where, we're taking little steps at a time of what does it mean to be protected by the law in Colorado as a disproportionately affected communities, and making sure that we're not allowing these communities that are overshadowed by wealth to be ignored and to actually be seen, and the environmental issues that they're facing are addressed. But I absolutely agree with you that they should be a part of the solution. I think nowadays, we have seen a lot of ski companies be really vocal about climate change because of their pocket, and their industry depends on snow and stable climate. But I think as consumers of these products and these industries, and we're helping sustain them, it is also part of our role as consumers to hold companies accountable to be social enterprises as well, to collaborate with Indigenous communities, with Latino communities, and do what is right for everyone in their communities. And we have a lot of power with that pocket, and we should use it.
Thank you.
Speaking of collaboration, we talked about that yesterday at Paramount. One of the challenges is to get the average person out, whether they're Indigenous or non-Indigenous, to speak because they're so busy with their families and they're trying to earn a second living and commuting. And it's even more challenging for Indigenous and Latino community to get out because they get more challenges that you've just produced. I was wondering if you could give us any advice on how you get your people out at that level, non-Indigenous and Latino community, that might help us figure out the non-Latino, non-Indigenous community to get the voice heard of the average person, instead of having the people with the big money, the big influence, the old companies come in and overwhelm a bill that you're trying to do in Congress or some act you're trying to do locally.
Well, again, just thinking about what you're bringing up, there's, in the past we've always seen these protests. A few years back in North Dakota, there was a Keystone pipeline that it was trying to go through Native Americans' land. There was a river, their water that was going through, and they were trying to put this pipeline underneath the river. They made a protest at that time where it was nationally seen on TV what their actions were, but it was portrayed in a negative manner from the Native Americans' point of view, that they were trying to save their water. Even the president at the time had got involved. So as it went forward down the road, years later, there was oil spill, and it did get into the water, and you're seeing it now on the news, what's happening. So, I think in any form, in any person, there's always you see what's right, see what's wrong, see what's there, always make that action known, voice your opinion. Right now on our lands, in our land in Utah, south of Blanding, there's a uranium mill tailings that's there from Energy Fields. So right now our tribe is fighting to have that removed. But again, money talks. Plain and simple. Everybody puts that nice word on money. No, plain and simple. Money talks, and that's the way. That's what's happening now. So the city of Blanding, they have a lot of job people that are working there. They don't want to move, and so we're having the issues that we're dealing with. We have had protests regards to the mine. It's called Energy Fields, the company. I think they're out of Canada. So that's what we're dealing with now. But it's everywhere, and that's what you're going to see. So again, like I always say, it takes the people to make that happen. Make it happen. Make that move, even though you're in the shadows, people look down on you, but it's okay. That's what needs to happen. So that's all. Just putting that in there.
And I wanted to add, we also have to pay attention to how a lot of times we hyper-focus on local issues and national issues. The United States is a big bully at an international level. And a lot of times we find refuge in our own communities and what's happening here. I'm from Mexico, and right now they just found the biggest mine of uranium in Mexico. And there are already talks about how the United States is going to start to infringe on the fentanyl war against Mexico, and it's associated with energy. And a lot of times we're not paying attention to what's happening. And what happens is these communities get decimated, their water gets polluted, there's violence in our communities, and then we are forced to migrate. Right? And then you see the problem right here outside of your doorstep. But this is not just here. These are international treaties. These are international attitudes, right? We have a lot of American corporations, Nestle, a lot of beer, and taking the water from indigenous people in Latin America and from other countries, and we allow our governments to be this big international bully, and then that is putting more pressure, and all those problems will come to our doorsteps. And they are here. Mass migration is associated with bad international actors. When you go to Latin America and you see the rights of people that are working in mines and exactly what is happening, and then you trace the money and you trace the power, and it comes back to that same colonial attitude. We cannot afford to continue business as usual. And the clean energy transition cannot continue to be operated in the same way we produce our country to the level that it is. Because when you affect the water of somebody in Latin America, in Chile, in Nicaragua, and Mexico, you are affecting the American people. At the end of the day, there is no action that we will not pay the price for. And if it's not in this generation, it will be in the next or the next. But we will not be able to continue down this road and these attitudes. So it is also imperative that we step out of our comfort zone and we start to look internationally about how our country is acting, and we do not ignore that. And we hold our governments accountable here about their international dealings as well.
Powerful. Thank you both, and Celine, for your amazing work. And I think we owe it all as hydrologists or utility managers to consider water security and equitable access and environmental justice in all of our work. And I hope that you take that away in your hearts today. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. A quick transition here. Let's go ahead and take a break. Please refill your mugs and your glasses. Help yourself to refreshments on the side wall, and we'll reconvene here in about 5 minutes or so. Thank you, everyone.